Hello there. Welcome to Noon Prayer Watch. It's Friday. The weekend is here. Shabbat Shalom. Hope y'all had a good week. This is Jacob coming to you from Japan. Thanks for tuning in or catching up on the replay. Anytime you watch our content, we are very much appreciative. Thank you for supporting us, for standing with us. This is Noon Prayer Watch. We are here on the wall, so to speak, watching, praying, discussing what is happening in our communities, our cities, our nations, and our planet. And today's topic is very controversial. There was an incident that happened in southern Lebanon, and it was all over the news, all over social media. If you're watching the topic of Israel and the Middle East and all that, a lot of people were talking, a lot of people got angry, a lot of different perspectives, and we're going to talk about that. If you don't know, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what the incident was. It might be shocking if you're watching on the screen, but this is what happened. It's something we need to address. IDF confirmed soldier, or a photo of a soldier smashing a Jesus statue in Lebanon. Confirms it's genuine, vows action. And they did vow action. They punished the soldiers. I'm going to tell you, spoiler alert, this is what happened. They punished this soldier. The other soldier taking the picture. Other soldiers nearby this incident are under investigation currently. They jailed the two soldiers involved with this incident, and they replaced the statue with the wrong kind of statue, which was again replaced afterwards. We're going to get into the details a little bit here in a minute, but the question I want to talk about is, what should Christians do in response? How should we feel? What should we say in response to a situation like this? You have an Israeli soldier, Jewish soldier, smashing a statue of Jesus. How should we respond as Christians? Obviously, it's bad. You shouldn't, destroy, desecrate other people's stuff. That's generally, no matter what it is. It doesn't usually lead to positive results in the end. There are more legal, more appropriate ways to dealing with that. We might talk about that, but I want to talk about this, in this particular incident right here. How should we feel? So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the perspective when it comes to these sorts of statues within religion. I'm going to talk about the incident a little bit, and then I'm going to talk about Jesus and the Bible. What would Jesus say? What would Jesus do? How would he feel if a statue of himself was being destroyed by a soldier like this? And what does the Bible say? That's what we're going to get into today real quickly. We're going to round the bases and talk about this because it's very important. But first, just going to get into the meta topic and lay some ground rules, some foundational things here at first. The topic of today is when Israel attacks Christianity. Now, if you study history, if you study the history between Judaism and Christianity, Jewish people and Christians, it is very, very ugly. I mean, the whole religion started in Israel, conflict between different sects of Jews about who the Messiah is and all that sort of stuff. That's how it started. The very beginnings of our faith was not pretty. Nothing human is, although this is, of course, God trying to redeem us. And we've made progress, but we got a long way to go. So it's very ugly. And if you read the New Testament, the people who believed in Jesus, they were hunted, harassed, killed. Eventually, they dispersed up into Turkey today, modern day Turkey, Greece, Rome, all that sort of stuff. You know the general history probably. And then Christians, it went to the Gentiles. It became a lot bigger, and as the world expanded, Christianity became big, became the official religion of Rome, became the official religion of all the states in Europe and such. Jewish people also spread around. The diaspora went all over the place. And over the millennia, the last 2 millennia, the Jews have been treated very poorly by Christian societies. I argue that a truly Christian society, a society where a majority of people are Christian, the values, the laws, the culture is Christian, that should be the safest place for a Jewish person to live. A Jewish person who does not believe in Jesus, even though they don't believe in Jesus, even though they might disagree. They might say rude things, mean things about Jesus or whatever. That should be the safest place for a Jewish person to live, especially like America, where there's freedom of religion. That should be the safest place for them to live. America, again, has a Judeo-Christian foundation. It came, is based on having human rights, having a contract with God. The only nation I think that has that, maybe another one came afterwards. Very unique in that sense. But the people who created America, who created the fabric and the foundation of those of us from America, our society, were heavily, heavily inspired by the Bible, by the philosophy and the perspective of the Bible about having balance of power within government. And hundreds of years later, certain political parties tried to abuse that balance of power, but the fabric, the foundation of the American way of government is stronger because the guys who wrote it, who created it, are really smart, and most of the people today are not. They don't understand the history. They don't understand the precedents other systems of government in the past have set. Like our founding fathers in America are really amazing in that they understood. Were they perfect? Absolutely not. Did they make the most perfect system? No, they did not. But they understood that foundation. And having freedom of thought and religion especially should allow for Jewish people to live in peace amongst Christians. But that hasn't been the case. America hasn't had the terrible incidents Europe has had, but it's not been perfect. And there's a whole other eschatological thing probably happening there I'm not going to get into right now. But on paper, just to reiterate my point one more time, Christian society should be the safest place. But that definitely has not been the case. And most Jewish people who understand history and who teach their children the history of their people, of their faith, have a lot of negative things to say about Christians and how they've been treated, especially when it comes to Europe. And most Christians from America in particularly, and I was one of these people, do not know the deep, dark history, all the nitty-gritty details that the Jewish people went through. We understand the Holocaust that happened in World War II, of course, because that was a fairly recent event in the grand scheme of things. But all of the smaller, you could call them little Holocausts, the pogroms and the fight for emancipation and all the different cultures in Europe, having human rights, having the same kind of rights as other citizens. Like, for example, a lot of people, this is so funny, anti-Semites always complain, the Jews, they rule the world, they control the banks, they control Hollywood, all these sorts of things. And the banks in particularly is a funny argument because anti-Semitic societies in the past in Europe banned Jewish people from doing all sorts of jobs except specific ones like banking, because back then, when you did a bank, it's against Catholic theology to have interest on loans. And so what they did was, Jewish people aren't Christians, and so they don't have to follow this rule. And so we'll put them in charge of the banking, and they can do the loans and do all that sin stuff. And then we can have a banking society where we have loans, kind of exploiting them spiritually to an extent there. And guess what? When you do that, your people are forced to do banking for centuries. You get kind of good at it, especially if your way of education and everything makes you kind of smart. And so guess what? Now, all these hundreds of years later, lots of Jewish men and women very good at banking and other things like that. So it's kind of like hatred pushes them into a corner, and then that backfires on them. And now we have the same people who would make those laws, those discriminatory laws centuries ago, are the same people complaining that Jewish people control everything, conspiracy theory people and all that. And this should go without saying, just because certain individuals from whatever group do something, you don't apply hatred or criticism towards everybody in that group. Even if it's like 90% of them. You are unjustly attacking that 10% who are innocent, and that is unbiblical. God is not happy with that. Okay, if a person does something bad, they should be criticized that as an individual. Their background or whatever shouldn't come into it. Is it a factor? I don't know, maybe. But individuals are responsible for the bad things that they do. When all is said and done and God judges all of us, we are going to be judged for what we individually did, not what our group did. Our, nations and peoples can be judged on earth, but as far as I know, I'm not an expert theologian. When we stand before God, we are held accountable for the individual actions that we do. And therefore, if sometimes you do need to criticize and stand against people who do bad things, wherever they're from, whoever they are, and they should be held accountable for their specific act. That's my view. Okay, so I say that because Christians, that's a biblical idea, and Christians, or people who call themselves Christians who are anti-Semitic, there's a scripture, in the Old Testament about how sins of fathers, they're passed down to the sons and whatnot. And that doesn't need to be, how it is. You're responsible for what you do. Your father, your forefathers, they have done things. Yes, those things can affect you. There are curses and things like that you have to deal with. But you are not condemned because of their sin, as far as I know. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry about that. Whatever I say, as Paul says in 1 Thessalonians, test it against Scripture and throw out the bad, keep the good. Anyway, what I want to say, though, is when it comes to Jewish and Christian relations, doesn't matter what they or anybody, any group does to Christianity, to Christians, to Christian societies. We have in this Bible, I keep holding this Bible up, we have a system, we have rules, we have commandments on how we need to respond. We need to respond in love. And not all the Christians do that. They respond in hatred. They want to retaliate. They want to punish. They want vengeance. They want to be vindictive. And that doesn't lead to anything good. It doesn't lead to good fruit. Our objective, you can say, do this, you can do that. Like, a lot of people make these arguments. You shouldn't be pushed around. You shouldn't let people attack you, kill you. You got to stand up for yourself. And to an extent, there is truth to that. But our objective is building the kingdom of God and spreading the gospel. And so when someone spits on you, sneers at you, says something bad towards you, destroys your property, like in the incident we're going to talk about today, our objective is, how do we respond in a way that could potentially reveal Jesus to them? That is our ultimate objective, is for them to encounter God and really encounter God, encounter Jesus, and come to faith in him, especially if they're Jewish, because the Bible Paul talks about that in Romans 11. I talk about this all the time, but it talks about how they are all going to turn to him in the end. Whenever that is, we'll find out. That is our objective. But a lot of people put this aside. They have their own ways of thinking, their own culture, and that is what influences their response. So I kind of talked about that too much. I want to talk about idolatry really quickly, because that's a big topic in this incident. We have, how should I say this? We have an interesting divide theologically in the quote-unquote Abrahamic religions. We have Judaism, Islam, and a lot of Protestant Christianity, where this group within the Abrahamic religion sphere does not approve of having images or statues or idols at all when it comes to religious figures, especially if they are a deity. So in Judaism, they don't have any pictures of God or anything like that. And the reason for this is I think really interesting. God cannot be defined by an image that man can create. God is an entity completely outside of our ability to comprehend. And having an image leads to idolatry, because you have a picture of something, an idol, which is a big topic in the Old Testament, and it's still a topic that we deal with in certain parts of the world today, like Japan. And what happens is when you have an image you can see, you can feel, you can touch, or whatever, you can smell, that becomes the box you define your God in. Like, some people might be able to differentiate. This is a statue of a God, but really he's bigger, or whatever. But some people are going to be like, this statue, this is my God. And that was a big thing in the culture where the Bible originated from. And it strongly says, especially from the book of Exodus, no idols, no graven images. And I think it's a really unique and interesting idea that thousands of years ago, we kind of viewed those people as very simple, but they were incredibly smart and intelligent, and they understood on a philosophical level that humans, excuse me, cannot have like physical images to represent what they worship. Like, we are creators, just like our God, and we create these statues. They don't just magically appear. It's different if it's like the sun or something. Some people worship the sun, they can see it, or the moon or the rain or whatever. But when you have a physical idol that you create with your own hands, like, and then you worship it, that's kind of a perverse. Like, the creator should not worship the creation, right? We have and when we talk about idolatry here in Japan, this idea comes up when there's like a storm, when there's a typhoon or something like that. The humans have to save the gods. They have to get the statues, to get all the religious things, and take them to a safe place. There's a fire, there's an earthquake or something. The gods cannot save themselves. That's a thing that also comes up in the Old Testament a couple of times. So you have that. You have some Protestants. I think other maybe traditional Protestant groups might have images or whatever, icons and all that. No pictures of saints. And Judaism does as well. And I think Islam sort of latched onto that idea, and they're really strict about not having images of anybody in the Bible or the prophets that they venerate or anything like that. And then you have on the other side, you have the Catholics, the Orthodox, and all of these more traditional Christian sects that use statues, that use icons, and they don't worship them. They don't say they're idols. They just say they venerate them. They do the saints as well. They have amulets. They have these physical things, and they venerate them. They honor them. They use them to help them focus, on their prayer and things like that. And it's really interesting. Sorry to be controversial or whatever, but when it comes to Buddhism and Hinduism, Hinduism has a lot of idols as well, and Buddhism borrows from a lot of those deities, but they don't. Buddhists do not worship these idols. They just use them to help focus meditation and things like that. I hear like a same sort of mindset when it comes to Catholics and Orthodox and how they interact with their images and things like that. But in my perspective, I agree with the Jewish perspective. I'm, from the Protestant sphere as well. I think that it's best not to have them, because some people will will box their concept of God and of Jesus and all these other people on those images. When you go to Israel and you buy some of these images, it says, do not worship this image. Like, you shouldn't have to say that. We should be able to understand that, but some people don't. And so if you don't have any at all, then it's not a problem. So this is going to come into become a big factor in the story. Let's get into the story real quick and then break it down. We have this incident. An IDF soldier smashes with a sledgehammer a statue of Jesus. This is a Catholic statue, I have found out. And we're not going to read the details of this incident because a lot of things have happened since then. Prime Minister Netanyahu, this is the official account of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The IDF has promptly completed the inquiry of an unacceptable incident that entailed a soldier vandalizing a Christian statue in a Lebanese village. The soldier who damaged the statue and the soldier who photographed the incident have been removed from combat duty and will serve 30 days in military detention in cooperation with the local Christian community. The IDF replaced the damaged statue with a new one. Israel deeply regrets this incident and will continue to adamantly protect Christians within its jurisdiction and pursue freedom of worship for all religions. This is the statue they apparently replaced it with, and this is a problem because that was the Catholic statue that they destroyed, and this is apparently a Greek Orthodox statue. You can see the icons on the tops there and the bottom as well, and so seems like people who replaced this didn't really know those details, and I honestly myself don't know some of the differences between those two sects. And so let's see some reaction. Let's see how some people, for one, a lot of people were mad. Were mad at the incident here, and were they mad when? And this was brought up. Here's the thing: this incident happened. Outrage. People who don't like Israel, who hate Jewish people, outrage was spewed and everything. But of course, when ISIS, when Hezbollah, when other Islamic groups do similar things, kill Christians even, we don't get the same level of outrage. So it is a bit hypocritical. And I could, point that out and make edgy statements about these people. But at the end of the day, it's kind of a moot point because this is a demonic spiritual spirit on people who push them to hate Jewish people. So of course they're not going to get mad when Muslims do that, because the enemy has no incentive to push a majority of hateful people, hateful Christians, people who call themselves Christians, to oppose Islam. Some people are even supporting Islam lately, warming up to it. So in response to this, a guy named Nick Sorter, who works for Tucker Carlson, or is seen on them. I don't know if he works for them or not. Sorry. He's seen on different programs. Breaking, in all caps, the Israeli military has sentenced 2 soldiers to 30 days in jail for destroying, big caps, dramatic effect, a statue of Jesus per the Associated Press. One of them was seen taking a sledgehammer to the head of Jesus. 30 days is way too light, but at least they are being punished for destroying property. In which someone else responds, Marina Medvin, who is a commentator as well, says 30 days in jail is not way too light. All across America, the destruction of property, even religious property, is a misdemeanor. The typical penalty for a first offense is diversion or a fine with restitution. Felony enhancement when property is valued above a certain threshold. A 30-day jail sentence on a first offense property destruction offense is almost unheard of in America, even in cases of religious items being destroyed. She asks the AI to fact-check her. But it is an interesting point. A lot of people were mad at this light punishment. But if this were to happen in America, it would be 30 days in jail would be more severe than the punishment that most people would receive, usually a fine or something like that. And so just to have an official response, Times of Israel reports an Israeli Defense Force soldier who smashed the statue of Jesus with a sledgehammer in southern Lebanon, along with the other soldier photographed the act, have been dismissed from combat duty, sentenced to jail. In a separate statement, the military said the troops went to Debil. They replaced the damaged statue with the new one. The IDF said the move was carried out in full coordination with the local community. And Netanyahu said the 2 soldiers were involved. They were in military detention. Okay. Oh, this is someone criticizing that. Sorry. And so they gave them this statue, and then someone points out, where is it here? By the way, so the community and some Italian soldiers in the UN, hey, they're actually doing something. No offense to them, but why are they there when wars keep breaking out? They replaced the statue the IDF gave with them with an actual Catholic statue. So that happened. This is what happens when you don't know the difference, which I don't blame them because it's kind of complicated anyway. But this is a big deal. This person points out, people don't realize how big of a deal this is. It is considered idolatry for a Jew to even gift something considered an idol. This is the equivalent of the Pope giving, a Hindu town a bunch of statues of their gods due to a nun breaking their protocols. And I wanted to say this earlier. a lot of Jews don't understand Christianity. We see this because, they tried to replace the crucifix and they did it with the wrong sex crucifix. And we have to understand that from their perspective, these are all idols. And even so, like a lot of them don't understand, like us who are in the Protestant sphere of things, where we don't agree with this and we don't have, crucifixes with Jesus on them and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of Jews completely, because of they perceive this to be idolatry, they completely like draw a line. I will not associate with Christians. I will not go into a church. I've been told by Jewish people I cannot go into a Christian church. Excuse me, because of the idolatry within them. And, I'm like, well, not all churches have these things. You could come to a Protestant church. And I could tell one person that, but the whole, the millions of Jews that believe this act that a lot of traditional Christians do is pushing them away. It is limiting the reach of the gospel. And the objection they have is somewhat understandable. Again, in the Bible, the concept of graven images is not a good thing. It's anti-graven image. That's one of the commandments. And even, there was a point, if you know the story of, I'm going to segue here for a second because this really backs up what I'm trying to say here. There's the story of Moses, and the people are sick, and he makes the bronze serpent, and he waves it, and it heals people and all that, right? And Jesus, references this in his ascent later in the Gospels. But there's a second part to that story. Later, and this wasn't necessarily a god or a graven image or anything like that. It was just something, God told Moses to do. But centuries later, I believe, during the time of Hezekiah, I think, that they kept that bronze serpent. And just like I said, you have something physical, people are going to start worshiping it, because the problem with idolatry is you don't have to have faith to visualize that idol. You don't need to believe in something you cannot see, like Hebrews says. You see that idol, there it is, I can worship it. And so they had that statue, and this during the reign of Hezekiah, I believe, people were worshiping that, and God commanded Hezekiah to destroy that because it was leading the people astray. And that was something God told Moses to do, back in the day. Okay, that's how serious the Bible is about this concept. And so, going back to the pictures here, this is a big deal, and I'll end this here with this tweet by a guy named Amat Segal. He's a political analyst in Israel. For the first time in the history of the IDF, a part of the defense budget had to be devoted to buying a statue of Jesus. But, he says, it was the right thing to do. Because, for them, that's generally a wrong thing, to buy or to purchase a graven image. And so for them, they were doing what Christians are sometimes, like in Acts chapter 10, are called to do. They put down their religious worldview in order to create peace, create shalom with someone else, someone who is different from them. That is what Peter had to do when he had to go to the Gentiles, when he had to go to Cornelius's house in Acts chapter 10. And that's what the idea of the Jewish people who don't believe in Jesus, who don't believe in the New Testament, that's what they are doing here. And if Christians who believe this sort of practice is correct, if they would put their religion aside in order to spread the gospel, who knows what would happen with Jewish-Christian relations. And he goes on just talking about how this is a moral failure and all this sort of stuff, especially considering how, a lot of anti-Semitic people accuse Israelis, Jewish people of being Christ killers. When you have a picture of a Jewish person literally smashing a statue of Jesus and filming it in the head. And he just goes on and on and on about how this is not cool. We have to hold them accountable. Have like a few more minutes, and then that's all I have. So, conclusion. This happened. The people responsible were punished. Israel tried their best to make things right, but they didn't get it exactly right. And it's understandable. It's confusing. But they sought peace. They sought to create shalom and to rest, because shalom doesn't just mean peace. It means to restore, to make things complete. And it's not just punishing the guy or apologizing. They do what they have to do to make things right. And that's what happened. But the ultimate question is this: how should Christians really respond to something like this? And most importantly, what would Jesus do? For one, we respond in love. When someone comes against us, no one physically was hurt here. It was a incident of property damage. But we still respond in love. And some people might have, but a lot of other people did not. They were outraged because they have a bias against Jewish people, because they have a lot of replacement theology, and not everybody who believes in replacement theology is like this, but a lot of them are. And so it just confirms their bias that Jewish people are bad, and haha, here's another incident. But it doesn't matter what they do. If they spit on you, because I hear that all a lot. You go to Jerusalem and Jews will spit on you. I've been to Jerusalem many times. I lived there for a summer. No one spat on me. Even the ones that knew I was a Christian. They were very nice to me, broke bread with me. Are there people out there who are rude and will do that? Probably, especially if you provoke them. And I think some of these incidents with spitting the other side provoke them. And you shouldn't do that. But anyway, even if there is no provocation and someone spits on you, someone comes against you, you respond in love. That's what this says. Not what your flesh says, not what your country's culture says. This says to respond in love. Read the Gospels if you haven't. Most of you probably have. And see how Jesus responds. But he flipped the tables over and he cleaned out the temple. And that story is always misused. Not to get into it, but what they were doing in the temple, they were buying and selling, but they were commercializing, commodifying religion. And Jesus was like, this isn't cool. Jesus believed in the Torah. He believed in the Old Testament. That's all they had back in the day. The New Testament hadn't been written. It was in the process of being acted out. But what would Jesus do? How would he respond? Would you read about the Bible? You read about Jesus. Do you think he would care? For one, he would probably be against having statues of him. That's my opinion. That's what I think. I don't think he'd be cool with that. And because that's, again, it's a very graven images are a no-no in the Bible, in the Torah. So he'd be against that from the get-go. But would he be offended by some person, Jewish or not, who didn't believe in him, smashing a statue of him? Well, he responded to people who actually smashed his entire body in love. I would think he wouldn't really care so much about a wooden representation of him. So that, I think, answers that question. And so if we are Christians and we believe in Jesus and we follow his example, we need to make sure that our response to incidents like this are like how Jesus would respond. So specifically with this one, I don't think he would care. And other than, that's somebody else's physical property, you need to restore their property, even if you disagree with their way, what they're doing, their way of worship and all of that sort of stuff. That is illegal. That is breaking laws. You can't destroy people's property. The enemy kills, steals, and destroys. We shouldn't act like the enemy unless you have the proper legal authority to do so. Okay? Even if people don't love us back, even if they attack us, we need to provoke them to jealousy, like Paul says. And if we are responding in hatred, being ugly, you're not provoking anybody to jealousy. You're not being a good witness for Christ. I don't expect anyone to change their mind on Jesus and is he the Messiah and all that sort of stuff. So we got to do better. And we're responsible for ourselves. But they're doing this, they're doing that. That's what children say, guys. They are responsible for what they do. We are responsible for what we do. And so we need to focus on ourselves and what we are doing and being a good example, being a light, being salt, and let God take care of the rest. We have faith in him, right? That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell. It's a small way you can help support this ministry. If you like to donate an offering to us, we very much appreciate that, even if it's a little bit. You can do so in the CCS app, in the App Store or the Google Play Store or whatever it's called now. I don't use Google, although I kind of always wanted to try it. That's all I got. Thank you for watching. Remember, always bring order to chaos. I will see you next time. Goodbye.